I think it's probably prudent to start by defining exactly what I mean by an unconventional watch. I'm referring to the way that it tells the time, and I'm going to classify anything that isn't a traditional analog or digital display as unconventional. As ever, I have a set of rules that I followed in order to guide my decision making process when researching this video, and they are as follows. Each watch that features on the list needs to be available for under $1,000. The watch has to have an unconventional way of telling the time, and perhaps the most difficult rule to work with, each brand can only feature once on the list for the sake of variety. With all that said, let's get straight into the video. Ziiiro are a company established in 2010 in a collaboration between a German-based designer and a Hong Kong-based entrepreneur. They're a watch brand based around a futuristic and minimalist design language that definitely ticks the box for unconventional design. Their Gravity model displays the time through two rotating coloured gradient circles representing hours and minutes, with a design language that looks more like a smartwatch display than an analog one. You can equip these with either a quite conventional strap or what is effectively a bracelet. The Japanese word Retsu can be used to mean either a line or a column, which makes a lot of sense when you see the design of this watch and the way that it tells the time. The inspiration is actually the concrete jungle of Tokyo, and in particular its many high-rise buildings. This is a watch that actually comes with a backstory. The watch is set in the year 3021, in a world that is now mostly virtual and there are more androids than humans, where skyscrapers now stretch into the sky as far as the eye can see. I dare say that is probably overselling what is effectively a series of LEDs attached to a quartz movement, but I'm not going to pretend it isn't kinda cool. It's the first, but certainly not the last watch to feature on the list that actually comes with a guide on how to use it to tell the time. The Anicorn Order watch is definitely a conversation piece. Though it looks nothing like a conventional watch, this is actually similar in design to a single hand model, an example of which you'll see featured later on in the list. Essentially, treat the entire dial as a single hand, with each of the dot patterns representing one of the 12 hours. You then need to use the 5 dots on the case between 12 and 1 to work out roughly what the time is. Far from an ideal system if what you want is accuracy, but in fairness, I think that is a criticism that you could expand to almost every model on this list. That isn't why you buy a watch that looks like this. Now, you can tell the time with the Void VO2 MK11, but it has also been specifically designed so that you need more than a glance to do so. On the surface, you might think that sounds counterproductive, but quite a few watches on this list tell a similar story, and the logic is really quite simple. They want you to take notice of the passage of time rather than just checking it, and understand that importance in the moment. I also think that there's a certain sense that you're spending more time actively using the watch that you've just bought. Clearly, this is a strategy that works, because this watch has actually been in production since 2009. I think the case dimensions might be a bit too much for me to pull off personally, but I am going to award the Void with my recommendation of the video, because I think it's a really well executed piece of unique design. You'll need to look closely at this watch to see that it's unconventional, because if we run through the basic expectations, it looks like a standard watch and has a conventional look to it from a distance, but it's only when you get a little closer that you can see it only has one hand. That hand makes its way around the dial once a day, and you use it to tell both the hour and can have at least a rough guess at the minutes. Effectively, it's a bit like a considerably more accurate modern sundial. It isn't necessarily the most out there piece on the list, but if you're after something that you can get away with wearing to any occasion that's still a talking point, this is a really strong option. Mr. Jones are a British watchmaking brand based in London who make watches that each have a completely unique aesthetic to them. Their most famous models are, at least in my view, a perfectly useless afternoon, Ricochet and the Number Cruncher. I've seen many videos feature those models, so instead I'm going to be picking out my personal favourite, the Ascendant, which was designed in collaboration with gilding artist Marion Lebez and uses gilded palladium applied in two different ways to create two different textured effects. Actually reading the time on this model is a bit of a challenge and requires a cheat sheet to learn. Not great if you need the time in a hurry, but a really cool aesthetic nonetheless and perfect for a list like this. It's worth adding that the automatic TY2709 movement is also unconventional, as it incorporates the jumping hour functionality. Something quite sad that I have to report that I found while researching this video is that a lot of these kind of unique and interesting timepieces don't tend to get much of a production run. There are so many pieces that you can read up on but find are no longer available to purchase. I can only assume that in a lot of these cases the research and development costs put into the models make them expensive and potentially costly endeavours. The QLOCKTWO was available to buy from established retailers in the UK up until a few months ago, but a search for this video showed no results at all, hence the second-hand pricing. A shame in this case because the QLOCKTWO is definitely a unique way of telling the time. The name of this brand and model is not accidental or just mere wordplay, because the idea with this time teller is that you can easily transfer it to work either on your desk as a clock or attach it to your bag, hip or wrist. Clearly taking inspiration from slide rules for its design, the time is displayed in a line at the traditional 12 o'clock position. But rather than the hands rotating, there are 3 discs, rotating at different speeds so you can read the time from top to bottom, starting with hours, then minutes, then seconds. I actually think this is a genuinely cool watch, but it's too big to be a real consideration for me, measuring in at 44mm in diameter. All good if you're a fan of oversized pieces though. If you've ever taken a peruse through the Xeric website, you'll know I could have made an entire top 10 list from this brand alone. It's effectively their entire brand identity. None of their watches are conventional. I was actually spoilt for choice here, but in the end I decided to pick the Scrambler Wandering Hour because unlike a lot of Xeric models, it has genuinely got a wearable set of dimensions. That's one big issue with unconventional watches. Often their unique way of displaying the time requires more space to do so. The Scrambler comes in at 40.5mm in diameter, making this viable for a lot more people than many of their larger offerings. The Wandering Hour setup is also easy to read. You just have to look at the top of the watch, read which hour is displayed, and then the minutes are displayed by seeing where the line meets the curved minute track. The rest of the dial space is just there for you to marvel at its inner workings. A really cool piece. $999 is the recommended retail price for the Blue Planet from Ciga in steel. Of all the watches to feature on the list, this is definitely the most well known, having featured on a number of far bigger watch channels than this one. That isn't to say that it's undeserving of this attention, having won the Challenge Prize in 2021 as part of the Grand Prix de Horologie de Genève. It is relatively similar to the Klokers model discussed earlier in terms of time telling, but uses 2 rings around a central relief of the Earth with a compass marker acting as your time telling guide. I did actually want to add one of these to my collection, but one thing that's always put me off is the lack of my own country featuring on the globe. It would be really cool if they made a range of models for different sections of the planet. So there we have it. What I consider to be the 10 best unconventional watches available under $1,000. The The real challenge of the video was staying to the one watch per brand rule, as a lot of the watches that tell time in interesting ways actually all belong to a small handful of companies. I'm sure you have some thoughts on my list though. Let me know in the comments what you think, what your experiences are with unconventional watches, and if there's anything you'd want to change about my list. Are there deserving models that I've overlooked? As a final aside, if I'm really honest, I want to get back into focusing on videos that I've filmed myself and really trying to get better as a filmmaker. It's actually really difficult to juggle making videos with working full time, being a father, husband, son, and even though I love getting out there and recording, I just haven't had any time at all recently. I've got a few trips planned in the coming few weeks, so fingers crossed for a change of pace in the near future. As ever, thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed what you've seen or found it informative, consider dropping the video a like and subscribing for more content like this.